to Everything's Cleaner in Texas, the show where we spotlight the people, processes, and products that are helping Texas clean freaks fight dirty better. From hospital sterilization teams to cutting-edge technology, from deep cleaning secrets to industry game changers, if it's making Texas fight dirty, we're going to talk about it on this show. My name's Hank Balch, alongside Dusty Glass, and every episode we'll be diving deep with the experts, innovators, and frontline fighters who are setting the gold standard for cleanliness across the Lone Star State. Because in Texas, we don't just fight dirty, we do it big. So grab your boots, buckle up, it's time to get clean. Hey there, Texas Sterile Processing Universe. You're listening to Everything's Cleaner in Texas, the podcast of the Houston Sterile Processing Professionals Association. My name's Hank Balch. I'm one of your hosts in studio today with Dusty Glass and Anna Castillo-Gutierrez. And we're going to be talking about the Medical Center, the Texas Medical Center in downtown Houston, Texas today on this episode to give you a little spotlight into what's special about the Medical Center, what sets it apart, and the impact that all of those things have in particular on the sterile processing experience of working in the Medical Center. So really excited to dive into this topic today. And I want to welcome you both to the studio. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Hank. I'm excited to be here.
I know, Dusty, we did our little introductions on episode 1 of this show. So I think, folks, by now, if you listen to episode 1, you should know me and Dusty pretty well. But, Anna, what's your background for anyone who doesn't know you?
Yeah, so I am a previous educator, elementary school teacher, kind of turned into sterile processing and just fell in love with the department. And I ended up staying here, but education's my background. So I'm an educator now.
And so I know in recent years, you've done a lot of educating. Like you say that you're an educator by training and by background, but you're also an educator even outside of your own health system. You've done a lot of podcast episodes. I've seen you speaking out there, both nationally and internationally. Where were you, South America this year or last year?
Was it last year, I believe? I lost track of time.
I know.
Yes,
Okay.
I was in South America doing a little bit of education. I am able to speak a little bit of Spanish and gave it a little try again. And
Okay.
I didn't do so bad. So
Good. Well, I've been told that kind of medical, clinical type of vocabulary in Spanish is a lot more difficult in general, you know, even for native speakers, right? Because it's a whole nother vocabulary that if you're not using it every single day, I guess it's easy to lose.
No, what is it? I had to practice with my parents actually quite a bit. They're fluent Spanish speakers. So hidrógeno de peróxido is tongue twister. And when that's the topic that you're talking on, it made it kind of difficult, but I had to run through it. It was a lot of fun being out there. I got to meet a lot of really neat people. So, and just the country itself, Brazil, are making huge strides and waves in the part of surgical technician and sterile processing. And it's huge for Latin America.
Yeah, you know, Dusty, that might be a good idea at some point on this show to talk about just the Hispanic influence and the Spanish language in particular in Texas sterile processing. Because I know we're not Brazil or, you know, South America, but there's a lot of crossover and there's a lot of impact on that. So that'd be a lot of fun at some point. I don't want to get us off track here, but maybe think about that. So maybe, Dusty, kick us off here. The Medical Center, Texas Medical Center. So what do we mean when we say that for anybody who's maybe not from the Houston area or just not familiar with this idea?
So thanks, Hank. You know, when we're talking about the Texas Medical Center, you know, a lot of places they have, you know, maybe 1 or 2 hospitals that are, you know, close in vicinity, and they may say, oh, this is our medical area. But, you know, just like they say, everything is bigger in Texas. So are the medical centers. We have over 20 hospitals just in the Texas Medical Center area. that ranges, from the largest trauma centers to some of the smaller hospitals that are in that medical center area. And from the best that do it, from cancer treatment to children's to trauma to you name it, you can find that specialty in the medical center. Who's leading that area in medicine, where the most cutting edge technology, most cutting edge physicians, doctors, and sterile processing technicians.
Of course. Right. Because without that sterile processing team, it'd be kind of difficult to do all of those surgical interventions that you mentioned, Dusty. So as you're talking, you mentioned about 20 or so hospitals there in the medical center. I Googled and it's telling me about 9,000 beds that are represented by those hospitals. I'm sure the number's probably a little bit larger even than that right now. So, in the U.S., I think we get some people listen to us overseas sometimes and they're like, 1,000-bed hospital? Oh my goodness. But, the U.S. in particular, like 1,000-bed, that's a pretty large hospital. Like, that's nothing to shake a stick at. But you start talking about 9,000 beds in one area, all crammed together in all of these hospitals, all servicing all kinds of different types of patients and procedures that you mentioned, but also on the cutting edge of that. I mean, we're talking about a lot of volume, and like the kind of volume that's really hard to wrap your mind around. Even if you're a part of like a large academic hospital that's standalone, you may have 1,000 beds, you may have 1,200 or 1,300 beds, and you're like, hey, we're a pretty big deal. Well, then you step into the medical center and you look around and you're like 9,000 hospital beds. Every direction I look, that's pretty overwhelming. So maybe let's start there. And we're going to talk about the cutting edge stuff and the research and just kind of the forward thinking aspect of the medical center. But I want to talk on a practical level on it is overwhelming. And if you're coming in to work in sterile processing, this is the big time. This is kind of like you got recruited. And if you're into sports, like you're walking on to play for the Yankees, or like you're stepping in and you're going to go play for the Patriots or the Dallas Cowboys. I guess we are talking in Texas here, right? So, this is not the minor leagues. It's big time. It's a big city. I'm assuming it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get into work and to park and to find it and all that kind of stuff. So kind of talk through like how you experience that, but then also how you communicate that, to folks that are interested in coming and working in the medical center.
Yeah. It's kind of neat that you brought it up in that way. As an educator, I'm the one that's doing the onboarding. And the one thing I kid about with my new hires and even the recruits, the contract people that are coming in is I know how it is. When I first came to my interview, my manager laughed at me and she had to send someone to go fetch me because I was lost near a fire hydrant outside. It was horrible.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was doing fresh out of college, and having to be at a central location within a hospital system, within the medical center of all those 21 hospitals that we were speaking of, and finding one department is not going to happen. And so you nearly have to hold someone's hand just to walk them into the hospital and tell them this is where we're going. And it's going to take you about 3 weeks just to get comfortable to find the department. So if you get lost, just call me. And that's normal. I think just stepping into the medical center and being in the ground can be overwhelming. I mean, half the time you don't know whether you're driving backwards or forwards in the medical center. That can even be overwhelming. And we've lost staff just because of those things. So I think it's important to distinguish, like it's not your regular hospital where you're coming and parking and it's going to take you 20 to 30 minutes to come in. Plan on 45 minutes just for the parking, just to make it to the locker room, just to get your scrubs and get clocked in. minimum 45 minutes if you live 15 minutes away. Right?
Yeah, we're going to be talking to folks from different dynamics, right? Like some community hospitals, ambulatory surgery here in Texas. And yeah, like you mentioned, heck, like you park in the parking lot and be in the department in 5 minutes. Right? Just like flat parking lot, like you can see the door when you park. you're in there, you're in scrubs, you're clocked in, 5 minutes, done deal. And then you're stepping into this, Dusty, as I kind of use the phrase, this is the big time. And with big time come some challenges, right? Because you put that many large buildings in one place in the middle of, there's a lot of other stuff going on in downtown Houston besides just healthcare. And you put all that there, and then you got to get all of these people from, point A to point B through the parking garage, through the rest of the hospital into sterile processing. How do you communicate the value of that, to your new hires and to your staff that, yes, we know this part is challenging, but what you're a part of is so important and so big?
Well, first, you kind of just have to start with, having them walk around and look. I think on every corner, every train stop, every facility, there is a statue of someone who invented a procedure there in the medical center.
It's like DeBankey's, is there a DeBankey statue out
there?
Okay.
Yeah, like DeBankey, you're talking about Red Duke, you name it. There are legends literally painting the train stations that you're using to get trained in, because in the majority of your facilities, right, you're taking the metro train, you're parking off site, you're going to take the metro train in to the facility. You're going to park about 1.5 miles off campus of the medical center. And if you are lucky enough to be one of those chosen to park in the facility, they're normally going to reward you with a nice little payment coupon normally.
Nice.
For that luxury.
So those are the benefits.
Yes, those are some of those benefits. But, I think the biggest thing is that, they're walking in, they're seeing those things. And when you really are able to just step back and see the things just from the outside, it excites you. It excites you from when you walk in and you're like, wow, I'm here, like you're saying, the big leagues, I think that resonates a lot. You walk into these facilities and you're like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. The amount of people that you see coming in as well. And if you're in sterile processing, that you're going to positively affect their life and their outcomes. And so that for me personally, that's what I try to paint to all of my new technicians and all my people that are onboarding. Look around and see all of the people that you are going to have an impact in changing their life potentially.
Yeah. So Anna, in that description, Dusty said you can look around and you can see history and all the big names and all the big impacts that they've made. But then obviously there's a huge focus on the future in the medical center. So they're saying, hey, we've done these things, but we're not done yet. And we're continuing to push the needle. So how does that culture of innovation impact the vision and the culture of sterile processing and what you guys are trying to do in the medical center?
Yeah, I think there's two things that you kind of mentioned is the culture of the medical center, where there is that degree of, it's an elevated setting of medicine, of technology. But then you also have, the Texas Medical Center. One of the things that not a lot of us know about, I recently found this out, is there's plenty of hospitals around the medical center that are not technically part of the medical center. And one of the biggest reasons for that is that only the Texas Medical Center, within that hub, only educational medical facilities are able to build. And so let's take Methodist or Memorial Hermann or Texas Children's. If you don't have the mentality of, I'm going to have this person that I'm going to be training, or someone's eventually going to be shadowing me, or there's going to be a medical student coming in here at some point, I am responsible for the training directly of a person that's going to be in the department. And that just comes with the title of being anywhere in the medical center. And so I think that's important to kind of establish is you have that responsibility, no matter who you are, what role you play, you're in an educational setting where you're going to be training the next generation of staff. And so that builds on the culture that you have for how important it is for you to lay the right foundation for the next person. And that just helps advance absolutely everything that comes with that idea of the Texas Medical Center. So.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. I did not understand that connection with education. Like, obviously there's a big drive for it. There's a value for it, but yeah, I didn't even realize that that's kind of a requirement for that collaboration, which makes a lot of sense. If you're driving innovation, Dusty, you're going to be committed to learning, ongoing learning. And, that passion, like Anna kind of brought out, that we're connecting this to the past and the future. But with all those changes and the cutting edge research and the shifts that are happening in the industry, obviously, like, you guys have to, in some sense, try to stay ahead of the curve to not only keep up with the changes, but by the time the changes are hitting the operating room, well, sterile processing should already know what's going on because they're the ones handling the instrumentation for that new way of doing things or the new technology that's hitting the OR suite. So how do you stay abreast? How do you keep your team on their toes?
Well, for me personally, and the things that we do, first and foremost, we have great rep partners that keep us in the loop on all of those advanced technologies. But I think the thing that shocked me the most, I've always dealt with physicians in the past, not always on the nice end, but being at the medical center, you are working side by side with some of these physicians that are literally, I'm not going to say recreating the wheel, but they are creating in their own space the wheel. And it's really encouraging to see them, one, place such a relevance on sterile processing and how important it is. But they're also giving you that feedback of those things. Like, these are the things that are affecting me at the site of where I'm performing these life-saving interventions. And you're being able to see it and talk to the people doing it. and so you're really getting that direct feedback right there from those physicians that are doing it. And for me, that, I was just nerding out, really having these conversations of like, it's like a dream come true for me.
Yeah, you're right. That collaboration, I think, from the physician level is not unique to the medical center, right? There's a lot of sterile processing departments out there that have built strong relationship with their physicians. But the difference, again, going back to this innovation piece and this research conversation, is the physicians in the medical center are oftentimes doing new approaches or new techniques or new procedures completely with new technology that makes that collaboration that much more important. And without it, to your other point, the feedback piece, that loop has to be very tight, or sterile processing, Anna, is going to be causing more problems than it's solving if we're not hearing back from our physicians that, hey, we need to tweak this process or improve this process, or we need to educate around this new technologies as it's coming in. You're an educator in your day job. So how do you keep up with that level of, pressure to keep changing things? Because you can't just, figure it out, kind of set it and forget it for the next 10 years. There's new things coming down the barrel every day. Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think it comes down to just doing the work, unfortunately. Like, there's no way around it. Whenever you're in a department and part of a team that's just so large, and then you're really under the pressure to perform, not only because you're in my sake, in a children's hospital, but because you're part of the Texas Medical Center and you have this higher standard, or you at least feel like you have this higher standard of guidelines that you just have to stick to because everyone's looking to you. My go-to is always, let me go into the department and see if it works for one of my regular technicians or a brand new technicians. If it absolutely does not work for them, then you sometimes have got to start from scratch. Like, there's nothing more to it. I once went to an interview. I wanted to be an educator at that point. I thought I was prepared. And one of the things that I respect, but I wholeheartedly disagree with is they wanted me to perform education for a larger group and still capture that information for the entire audience so that I captured all of them at the same time. And sometimes it's doable if it's not a risky situation, but more than half of the time, so I'm going to say all of the processes that we do in sterile processing are so high risk that you almost have to individually perform the activities as an educator. And when you're looking at about 60, 100 people on staff, like Methodist, Memorial Hermann, you're thinking that's impossible. But I bet you we get it done. You know, it just happens, and we have to do it that way, or it's not going to work for our staff, and then it's not going to work for the patient. So it just goes back to that.
So, Dusty, Anna brings up a really interesting angle here. In general, across the country, there's all kinds of conversations about educator roles and how rarely do we come into departments that have inadequate number of educators per staff. Like, what is that number, to support? But whatever that number is, that benchmark kind of baseline out there, coming into the context of the medical center, of these larger facilities doing complex, high risk cases, it seems like that number has to be even smaller, like, students per teacher or, staff per educator. That number should be even smaller because of the level of nuance and complexity that Anna's bringing up, that we've got to not check the box and say, okay, like we told all, 150 of our staff, so now they know, quote unquote, but we really want them to know and to internalize and actually be doing this. So how do we manage that in this atmosphere, again, that prizes education, that supports innovation, and yet in the intersection of sterile processing, we know that we've still got some tensions there for how do we support that educational drive and competency with all of these staff that are coming in, with all different kinds of educational backgrounds.
Honestly, that's really key. The best way I would have to describe it is that it not only has to be a team effort, it has to be something where you have buy-in from every single level. That's your executive suite. That is, your director, your direct report. Educators, supervisors, literally everyone needs to be on the same accord to really keep that in the forefront. And, the great thing I believe that for the Texas Medical Center is they put their money where their mouth is with that, in my opinion. The per capita of educators or support or folks that are dealing with getting these technicians trained or scrubs or physicians or you name it, it's pretty remarkable. I've never seen the kind of people talk about that they want to be able to do it. I've rarely seen a place be able to back it up like they do in the medical center.
So, Anna, Dusty brought up in his answer that this is a team mission, right? And I saw you shaking your head. I know, like the listeners can't see you, but I saw you shaking your head when he said that. And even though, I guess this is bigger than the medical center, but I think it's an important topic here as we're highlighting education. Because of the intersection and these per capita education, I think was the phrase, Dusty. That's a pretty good word. I don't know if there's a better word. I was looking for something like that. Because we know there's going to be a tension, there's departments all across the state of Texas that either do not have an educator or they have one educator for way too many people that they're trying to train. So how do you as an educator cultivate that team mindset? And for anybody of any role that's tuning into this episode, let's say they're a technician, they're a supervisor, they're a lead tech, they're a quality assurance tech, they're a manager, they're a director, what do you want them to know about the educator role that maybe they don't know or they're taking for granted, and this is your time to just tell them like it is?
Yeah. So I'm one of those, and I love my role. I love my position. I love my hospital. But right now I am, in Houston at least, the only educator in my system. And I would not be able to do it if I didn't have my team leads, if I didn't have my managers, if I didn't have my director support. All, like Dusty said, it's a team effort. And I think it really, like, up to our VPs, like, they truly get it. And I think the medical center understands, at a certain concept or level, they understand how important sterile processing is. And so they, like, the resources that we need, like XYZ, here you go. And here comes our educators. Memorial Hermann has several educators and they all work as a team, but I promise you they're not doing it alone. They have their coordinators, they have their managers that are facilitating some of the education. We as educators are handling, I guess you'd say, the administrative side, the paperwork that we need to show the auditors that come through. We're collecting and making sure that all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But the actual people that are helping to facilitate the training and the learning in the department are, of course, going to be the technicians, the coordinators, the team leads, all of those managers and supervisors that are in the department actively working. And guess who's the ones that are helping to facilitate that learning so that they can teach those staff? We're the ones that are doing it. And so, again, it comes down to sometimes it's one-on-one, but we get it done, and it is a group effort and it's a team effort that's making it happen.
So I'm going to translate that into Hank language here for anybody that's tuning in. If you're assuming that your educator does everything from A to Z, if education is in the planning, then that means, well, the educator is going to do it from the teaching, the training, the competency check, the planning, all of that, then that's a bad assumption. So, Anna didn't say that. I said that, but Anna's shaking her head, so she agrees with me. So, we got to take this team dynamic, like Dusty laid out of the medical center across the state of Texas, across the globe, to drive and to facilitate this education. But like you mentioned, Anna, I think it's really important. One of the biggest blessings of having an educator is you got someone to sit down and think with a curriculum mindset. What across the board does my team need to know? Where are their gaps? And then to strategize how can I most effectively and efficiently plug those gaps with education. And then you lean on your team to get that facilitated. So I think that's a terrific vision. And again, I know that's bigger than just what's happening down there at the TMC. We're getting close to the end of time. We've got a couple of minutes here, guys. I want to ask y'all one more question about the medical center in particular, kind of broad. And then I want to ask you both just what your experience has been, working in the medical center as an individual. Like, we heard a little bit of Anna's story of, hey, I got stuck by the fire hydrant. I was like, I need some help. Phone a friend, come find me. So, that's part of it. But obviously, you've been down there a couple of years since. So I'm assuming that you have more to share there, Anna. But before we get to that, because we've got all these intersections coming together, we got this focus, investment, this passion for research, this culture of education, all coming together, creating, pulling from the past, changing the present, because we got a lot of cutting edge stuff going on. But then obviously there's a future direction for sterile processing in particular in the medical center. So Dusty, what would you say we have to look forward to in the next 5, 10, 20 years if you're sterile processing in the medical center? What is that going to mean for you?
It's really crazy. The thought of what could be, just seeing what we're doing right now. I mean, I think 10 years ago, you would have thought robotics was light years away. That there would be a way where the physician would be performing the surgery right next to the patient, right? Not across the room in a robot. Where I think we're going to be at in 5 years, it's truly going to be remarkable. I think that the autonomy of the physician to get the data and the fine nuances of micro instrumentation, robotics, 3D printed, I would not be surprised if in 5 to 10 years, if every set was we didn't sterilize them. We reprinted them, where, sterile processing changes. Instead of us reprocessing these stainless steel, we're reprinting these sets
Reprinting them.
needed for the next day.
That'd be wild.
It would not shock me.
Okay. All right. What do you think, Anna? What's the next 5-10 years look like?
I kind of want to going a little bit back and kind of sharing a little bit about my story, because I feel like it's so important. I started at the very beginning of 2012 at the hospital that I'm at now. And I guess what shift I got stuck with overnight, right? And there were times where I was by myself and seeing the physicians that are now our chiefs, seeing the physicians come in the middle of the night and practicing on developing surgeries that weren't even invented, and I'll say a little piece of one of the biggest reasons that I love what I do, but it's also, it's something that really impacted me, was being able to see the challenges of some of those nights where some of our patients maybe didn't make it, and seeing how devastating that was to not only the physician, but to the staff, and then kind of contemplating on it and understanding your role, that if I just had this one extra instrument in my set, if I just, if the physician is able to do what he needs to do and I'm able to back him up with the instruments that I'm capable of having ready for them, that was super impactful. And then you fast forward to today, this 13 years later, right? And you run into the same physicians in the hallway or in the elevator and you say, hey, do you remember me? We worked at 3 a.m. and we developed these things. It's mind blowing, and then the next day you wake up and it's on your intranet of the homepage of your facility that, hey, this is the 10th, 13th year anniversary of this surgery being developed there at your hospital, there in the medical center. Like, that is groundbreaking. It should be earth shaking. Like, you should be getting goosebumps because you were part of that team. And so, like, looking forward to it's seeing the impact that you make for your patients, like 10 years from now. The fact that you're one of the only facilities in the medical center where they have to fly in families and children and moms and dads just to be able to have surgery at your facility, in your room, in one of your rooms. That, to me, is amazing. And that, to me, I've made it,
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I love about this podcast is it's a very local, personal podcast, because we're all here in Texas. We're talking about Houston, and even as you were telling that story, Anna, about, flying families in, like, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to another dad, and he had his little 3 kids, and he was telling a story about how the girl had swallowed a quarter, and they just could not get the quarter out at the ER here in College Station. We're about, an hour and a half or so outside of Houston, and where they go, what they do, they took her down to Children's in Houston, and they followed the ambulance like all the way down there, to get that taken care of, to your point. And so I love your answer, because you've seen that future happen, right? 12, 13 years ago, like, you were kind of where we are today, saying, like, what's the future going to look like? And now you've had the opportunity to see that play out. And there's a level of confidence now, like, you don't know what the future specifically looks like, but you know that type of innovation is going somewhere and making that impact, like what Dusty said at the beginning, of all the names and faces that are painted on the metro coming in the next 10, 20 years. And it's going to be more names and more faces, maybe not sterile processing names, even though there should be, but, more names and faces that we know because we've seen them in the hallway. And we've worked with them at 3 a.m. in the morning to put new trays together, new instruments. I think that's a really, really powerful testimony to what's happening down there. So, Dusty, as we try to do at the end of each one of these episodes, we want to give a call out, for the vision of the show and kind of where it came out of in the chapter support here. So tell folks about the Houston chapter and, how they can get involved, where they can find more information, that kind of stuff.
As always, www.hsppachapter.com will take you to the website. We have all of our links on there for Sterile Works with a Z, to Facebook, Twitter, all of those things, membership, kind of what's going on. We post videos. We're about to upload our last seminar, a 5 CEU approved seminar on there that we were able to be a part of. And then we're also going to have educational CEUs easily accessible at your fingertips, able to get those certifications taken care of. You won't have to lose your weekends going to things, or, maybe you just can't get away to go to, one of HSPA's large seminars. You can't get the time off, but hey, you know what? Your local chapter can be there to hook you up and get you those CEUs and get you taken care of, especially if you wait to the last minute and you need them quick.
That never happens, right? So, if you're tuning in from Texas and you're within driving distance, we'd love to have you down for any chapter event, seminar. And if you're not within driving distance, we really appreciate you tuning into this podcast. We hope you get encouraged to bring back this information to your own chapter if you've got one. If you don't have a chapter, reach out to guys like Dusty and say, hey, how'd you start your chapter? And hopefully get one going in your region of the world. If you're an educator or if you're a vendor that wants to support the work that's going on down here in Houston for the state of Texas, please reach out. We'd love to have you sponsor events or, come and educate. There's a ton of great educators on the vendor side. We love having at the various seminars on the podcast as well. Or if you just have a question, if you're a manager or an educator or a technician and you're just like, I don't know where else to turn and I need help on X, Y, and Z, the people on this podcast and the members of this chapter, that's why they're there. That's why they're giving up their weekends, like Dusty kind of alluded to, because they want to help each other build a better sterile processing culture in Houston, in Texas, and yes, around the globe. So thank you both for a great episode, great interview today about the medical center. And I'm looking forward to talking to more folks around the state of Texas about, what's happening in the small ambulatory surgery centers out there, the other academic institutions scattered across the big metros in Texas and everywhere in between.
Thank you, Hank. It's been a pleasure. Definitely always fun to be here with you guys.
Yeah, always. Thanks for having us, Hank, and thanks for the support with the chapter.
All right. If you loved today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review because this fight against bioburden is as big as Texas. If you've got a sterile processing tip, story, or even product that's making it easier for Texas clean freaks to fight dirty, we want to hear about it. Connect with us on social media anywhere you find Beyond Clean. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. Until next time, lasso up those dirty trays and saddle up those sterilizers because we're about to show the world why everything's cleaner in Texas.